Alright, like, click, subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. It's Netflix time. This movie's called Night in Paradise. Hiding out on Jeju Island following a brutal tragedy, a wrong mobster with a target on his back connects with a woman who has her own demons. The movie just came out. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes long. It's about betrayal, revenge, and beef to the highest fucking level. Spoiler alert, let's get it. So we start off with my nigga Tay. He's an enforcer for the clan. He's talking to this guy named Do who works for the Basuda clan. There was an incident where Tay that got some of these dudes fucked up. The problem with that is they work for the Basuda clan, which his boss Mr. Yang has been trying to keep peace for a long time between them two. That shit disturbed it. So after that meeting, he's on his way to meet his sister and his niece at the airport. They get him to a hotel so they could drive, you know what I'm saying, or so they get to celebrate their niece's birthday. He gets to her present and says he'll meet her there later on, which just happened to be a tablet, an Apple tablet, or something like that. Well, as they drive off, Tay and his right-hand man, Jin, they gotta attend to some business. But before that, he goes and talks to a doctor. Apparently, his sister's got some type of cancer or something, and he doesn't know how long she's going to live. He's hoping that she can get a transplant or something. He calls his sister to make sure she's good, but as he's talking, somehow the phone gets disconnected. We found out the reason why the phone was disconnected because they was in a horrific accident. As you can tell while he's laying on the pole, that shit don't look good. Come to find out, both of them died in the accident. Damn. And here we have Mr. Yang. That's Tay's boss. He's there to give his condolences, but he also thinks Do is behind the situation. So it wasn't no accident, so you already know what Tay thinking. He tells him not to do anything rash, but he does want to rectify the situation. They go to a spa where him and Do have a conversation, and he goes to another room to one of the pools to just dry off or rinse off. Unknowingly to the bodyguards, I'm guessing one of his crew members stashed a knife in one of the tubs. You already know what time it is now. He starts murking all these niggas, and then he finally gets Do. Done deal, dead. He sneaks out one of the back windows, gets into his car, and goes about his business. Next day, Mr. Yang is waiting at the airport. Tay meets him there. Mr. Yang gives Tay a ticket and some money so he can go to Jeju Island so he could transfer there to go to Russia. The street's too hot out here, my boy. You gotta lay low for like a week. On the other side of town, Mr. Yang's crew gets attacked by the Beisoku clan, and they give him the business. Tay gets on his flight. He calls for instructions, but this girl named Jay arrives to pick him up. Meanwhile, we got this uncle that's selling imported guns to niggas. He's like their immediate connect so they don't have to go through Russia or something like that. This guy and his crew be asking too many questions. We don't like that. Then they go about their business. But as soon as they leave, Tay pulls up. Turns out Tay's gonna be staying with this guy for a week. Turns out the guy Tay's staying with is actually Jay's uncle. He tells Mr. Yang he made it safely and everything's all good. Or so we thought. Because he finds out the news that his men was being attacked by the Busika clan. And then on top of that, he finds out that Do is still alive. Yeah, his man tells him that Do's recuperating in the hospital. Yeah, man, it's a fucking mess. So then he gets a phone call. From who? From the leader of the Busehil clan, Chief Ma. And trust me, he don't tolerate no bullshit. So we go back to the massacre that happened in the parking lot earlier. And Chief Ma comes through, he just starts cutting people's faces off. I'm like, the fuck? Meanwhile, Tay's just waking up. He goes outside and he sees Jay having target practice. Then she puts the gun to her head like she's about to kill herself. Tay's like, chill out, man. You gotta calm the fuck down. But she pulled the note and there was no bullets left in the chamber. And after that, she just walked in the house. It was like, what the fuck? Meanwhile, Mr. Yang is waiting in his warehouse and he's got this container with him, a cooler with him. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what's in there. He meets up with this guy named Mr. Park. He's like the captain of a police force. And then the cooler's like pieces of fingers. Ugh. He's like, look, all this shit going down, we gotta have a meeting with Chief Ma. Now, in this scene, Tay visits the morgue. I guess he was visiting his niece and his daughter, whatever like that. But I'm thinking to myself, did he go back to China, then come back over to the Jay Island? I'm like, what the fuck? But next thing we know, he's back at Jay's house. Next day, he goes outside for a smoke. He sees Jay in the car, and she's all slumped over. We're like, what the fuck is wrong with her? He looks down and sees she has a goddamn needle in her arm. Like, yo, this chick is really trying to kill herself. They took her to the hospital, and as the uncle and Tay are talking, he finds out that she don't have much more time to live anyway either. We don't know if she's got some type of cancer or disease, but the bottom line is she don't have long. But the uncle's trying to get her to the States, so at least she'll have a 20% chance of surviving. I'm like, damn. And then we have the meeting with Mr. Park, Mr. Yang, and Chief Ma. Basically, Chief Ma wants to kill Mr. Yang because of beef, you know what I'm saying? Mr. Park's like, look, I don't give a fuck about none of that. We need to keep peace so I get my pension and get this shit popping, you know what I'm saying? Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Tay's checking up on Jay. Tay's like, fuck all this, I'm getting up out of here. So they ride out to get something to eat. So they go to this spot she loves to get some mihan. I think it's like a delicacy with like leftover pieces of fish. They have a very morbid relationship. They always talk about death and stuff. She tries to get him to drink. He's like, I still gotta drive. It's like, one sip won't kill you. She's like, we don't even have DUI stops out here, so you good. But of course, they get pulled over. But because he didn't have that much, he was good. Can't say the same for Jay though. Anyway, he gets her back in the car to drive home. He gets a phone call from Mr. Yang talking about he's gonna meet at the airport tomorrow. But the thing he's gonna do to rectify the situation, he's gonna offer up Tay to Chief Ma. because Mr. Yang's trying to keep peace with the clans, but still, that's dirty as fuck. While Tay's driving Jay back home, they have this crazy ass conversation. Uncle's doing his transactions with these niggas again, but then this guy wants to take over his whole shit because he said, fuck it, I gotta get it straight through the Russians, yo. Because it's messing with the Buseho clan's plans, so clearly he's with them. And they ended up stabbing Unc. I'm like, damn. But Unc ain't playing that bullshit. He busting off on niggas. While that's going on, they got to the house, and niggas is outside, they started lacing niggas. But this dude came around the back and started lacing Unc. Unc was firing out shots too, but both of them ended up getting duffed. Yeah, your uncle done deal, Jay. He all fucked up. Tay gets the drop on them niggas, and then Jay gets a gun and starts banging off on niggas, and then she wants to just stay there with her uncle. Tay like, he ain't got time for this. He gotta drag her ass out. They go to this cottage where some of her peoples live at. They're not her parents. They're like cousins or something like that. She tells them she's good, but you know she's pretty distraught about everything that's happened. Later on, Tay and Jay are outside smoking on a bench, and she don't know whether she's happy or glad to see her uncle gone. And she tells this backstory about how her parents and her brother was killed because of something her uncle was involved in. Her uncle took revenge for the people that killed their family, but the thing is, if he wasn't doing the things that he was doing, that's when it took place in the first place. So they get back in the room, and she's like, come sleep with me tonight. He's like, no offense, but you crazy. You're not my type. She's like, all right, fine then. You ain't my type neither. Yeah. You just mad because he ain't stay. He actually ends up staying in the room next door to her. See? Right next door. They get up in the morning, he takes her for breakfast. He actually tries the mihan this time. He gives this backstory about how his mom used to make it when they didn't really have any food. His sister hated it, but he loved it. Says the smell of it always reminds him of his mom, who I'm pretty sure is dead. After that, they go for a ride back to the spot. Meanwhile, we got Mr. Yang and Chief Ma waiting at the airport. They get back to the spot. He tells he's got to go to the airport to meet up with Mr. Yang, but he hasn't been able to get in contact with anybody but Mr. Yang. She's feeling like something's off and she don't want him to go. But regardless, he ends up going anyway. But once he gets there, he gets a phone call from his man Jin telling him Mr. Yang set us up. You gotta get the fuck out of there. Then he sees Mr. Yang surrounded by Chief Ma's men. Yeah, it's a setup, my guy. He gets out the airport high-speed chase. Crashing on the side of the road, they about to get duffed. He done fucked all these niggas up, still trying to find a way to escape. Luckily, the police are driving by, so it gave him a second to hop in somebody's car. A car that wasn't damaged, by the way. And he gets loose. Meanwhile, Chief Ma's pissed off at Mr. Yang that Tay escaped. He's like, don't trip, we can still get to him through Jin. He's like, damn, you really are a rat, yo. Well, make it happen. Tay goes back to the house and finds out that Jay's gone. He calls her, she's over at her uncle's house. He tells her to get out of there because they're on their way, but she's not even listening. She don't even care because she's thinking to herself, I don't have that much time left on this earth anyway. And of course, he gets a phone call from Chief Ma, talking about he's got Jay and Jin. Talking about he'll let her go if you sacrifice yourself to me. You got 1 hour. So with no game plan at all, he just walks right on in. Of course, Chief Ma's men beat the shit out of him. And while he's basically talking shit and berating him to death, found out that Mr. Yang already gave the order to kill Jin. He's like, nigga, what the fuck you think you trying to pull? He's like, no, we just gotta get him out the way, man. We don't want no loose ends. And Tay's like, man, you are a piece of shit. Fuck you. And then Mr. Yang gets his licks in on Tay. And then Chief Ma's like, all right, that's enough. Then Chief Ma goes over to Tay and tells him a secret. What's the secret? I'm about to tell y'all. It turns out him and the Basuda clan were not the ones that set up the whole situation for his niece and sister to die. It turns out Mr. Yang actually killed them himself. Yeah, Tay, Mr. Yang is a fucking dirtball. But why, though? It turns out because the boys were following Tay so long, he'd have been next up in line, and he didn't want him to take over. But even if that was the case, Chief Ma still knocked off the rest of your clan, so what the fuck was the point, Mr. Yang? This no good piece of shit has to die, yo. It's not gonna be through Chief Ma's hands because he protected him through the police. The men let Tay go so he could take his frustrations out on this bitch ass nigga. But only so much because one of the men passed Mr. Yang a knife and stabs Tay right in his side. He's still putting up a fight, but eventually Tay dies. As promised, they do let the girl go. After that, they pour gasoline and burn the whole shit up. Letting her go was gonna prove to be a costly mistake. The next day, she gets on her scooter and goes to this restaurant. Apparently, she knew these motherfuckers was in here. How? I have no idea. Anyway, she sees all these niggas just chilling, eating and shit. She got a duffel bag and she locks the doors from the inside out. Yeah. When you see somebody do that, you know it's about to be a fucking massacre. And by God, it was. She laced everybody in a fucking restaurant. This nigga Chief Ma pops out the back door, and she laced his ass too. She laced the dude that gave her uncle the business, and then Mr. Yang's bitch ass got it too. And after all the devastation, she goes to the water. She can hear the cops coming and everything. And then after that, she basically does herself in. The last thing we see is a montage of the places she's been. And that's Night in Paradise for you. This shit is off the fucking chain. Night in Paradise on Netflix. Like, click, subscribe, do all that. You're on the top of this. Click these, y'all, easy, mister. Big. You got that slogan.